Liberal Viewer presents.
So with recent news focus on marijuana legalization at the beginning of the year in Colorado, Jon Stewart on The Daily Show was able to find a lot of hypocrisy in the coverage of the dangers of marijuana compared to how alcohol is covered, including of course on Fox News, where Stewart started his skewering by showing some silly comments about pot from former Fox and Friends host Gretchen Carlson and current host Steve Doocy that you can see here.
A no on pot because I believe it is addictive and it leads to more serious drugs.
What's to keep somebody from getting all potted up on weed and then getting behind the wheel?
Of course, Jon Stewart did make good fun of the potted up on weed comment there from Steve Doocy, but his most effective criticism was of the hypocrisy of Gretchen Carlson, among others, for having a strong stance against marijuana but a much more lax attitude about alcohol, even though alcohol is much more dangerous, as Jon Stewart explained in this clip.
A recent UC San Diego study found that alcohol appears to harm the teenage brain even more than, and I'm using clinical terminology here, getting potted up on weed. So your argument against marijuana, it would carry a lot more weight if these same individuals had a similar perspective on America's alcohol usage and go.
It's Wednesday, best day of the week.
Great job getting us drunk.
We could all use a stiff drink.
Fantastic margarita day.
So with Gretchen Carlson's hypocrisy on marijuana versus alcohol exposed there by The Daily Show on Tuesday, I guess it wasn't surprising that on Wednesday, Gretchen Carlson's new show, The Real Story, broadcast a panel discussion comparing the dangers of marijuana and alcohol, but in true Fox News style, supposedly straight news anchor Gretchen Carlson first addressed the comparison using opinions, not facts, referencing a recent poll in this clip.
Let's look at a new poll, Jill, because I want to show you what this says about what Americans think about pot smoking versus drinking alcohol. So look at this. Which one do you think is more dangerous? Marijuana, only 12%. Alcohol, 73%. Why?
Why? Could it be because alcohol actually is more dangerous than marijuana? As I documented in my 2009 video debunking a Fox News story about so-called killer marijuana, there's basically no lethal dose of marijuana, with a theoretical lethal dose requiring consumption of about 1,500 pounds in 15 minutes, and meanwhile, just alcohol poisoning itself kills several hundred people per year, and that's not to mention the many thousands of deaths related to acute and chronic alcohol use. So let's see if the lethality of alcohol and the non-lethality of marijuana come up when Gretchen Carlson asks her three guests to compare their dangerousness, starting with Jill Zarin, the Real Housewife from a Real Housewife reality show, who mistakenly referred to the poll as a study in this clip.
Oh, you know, that's an interesting study, and I've never seen that, and I'm curious to know what the answer is versus what you think. You think that, but what actually is the answer, which is more dangerous, I don't know. I think that, you know, your lungs, protecting your lungs against any kind of smoking is not a good thing.
Well, maybe they're thinking about driving potentially, meaning dangerous in the sense of after you're inebriated, maybe it's more dangerous.
Well, I think alcohol, if I had to guess, is more dangerous because you're more likely to fall asleep at the wheel.
I'm pretty sure even drunk drivers who don't fall asleep are dangerous, and the rest of that commentary from the star of a reality show was not surprisingly pretty fact-free. But what about when Gretchen Carlson posed the same question to Fox News contributor and media analyst Lauren Ashburn in this clip?
I know you have kids, young kids, and there's been so much education about smoking cigarettes, and yet not as much potential education, I guess, about smoking pot, as far as if you're going to talk about lungs. So why do you see this trend where people think that alcohol is more dangerous than smoking pot?
Well, as for talking about kids, I have a 13-year-old, and right now they're doing drug prevention, alcohol and drug prevention in school. And the law that has just come up has made it very difficult for teachers to talk about don't do drugs, you know, don't get on this. And it's very mixed signals for them. But in terms of alcohol, I think that in the schools and in my son's school, what they're doing is weighting it equally as equal offenders, if you will.
Of course, marijuana and alcohol are not equal offenders when it comes to deaths, at least, and that whole argument that the legality of marijuana sends a mixed message to our kids in alcohol and drug education classes is just stupid, given that alcohol is already legal. But even though there was really nothing informative in the commentary from either Fox News contributor Laura Ashburn there or Real Housewife reality star Jill Zarin, what about the actual medical doctor, obstetrician gynecologist Dr. Tara Allman, answering the same question here?
Well, before we change topics, doctor, what is the hazard comparing alcohol to pot? medically?
Well, it's just so much easier to get your hands on alcohol, right, all age groups. I think really the concern for marijuana probably in the older group is less concerning, right? I think probably the baby boomers are reliving their glory days back when they were first using marijuana. I think the concern is probably really for the young people, right? We don't want young people to be introduced to substances like this, which will then potentially lead to use of maybe heavier drugs. That's really the bottom line here.
That was pretty bad, because not only did Dr. Allman there not answer the question about marijuana versus alcohol with the facts about alcohol's greater lethality, but she also asserted the pretty dubious gateway drug theory about marijuana, which I recently saw debunked pretty well by a D News video from last year, including links to several scientific studies, like this one from Rand showing marijuana really isn't a gateway drug, and worst of all for this discussion, this study from last year showing the real gateway drug is actually alcohol. So, as usual, this Fox News panel discussion broadcast more biased misinformation than accurate information, not just from the Real Housewife and the media analyst, but even from the medical doctor, who all seem to do their best to cover up the facts showing alcohol is far more dangerous than marijuana, I think, but I want to know what you think. Does Fox News reporting show a bias for alcohol over marijuana? And in case anyone wants to challenge the premise of that question, is there any rational argument that marijuana is more dangerous than alcohol?
YouTube, you decide.